The world of red dot optics. The ability to turn this normal everyday firearm into this. What's up YouTube? KS Gun Guy here. Thanks for joining me today. If you like what you see here, do be sure to like, subscribe, and share. There's plenty more content on the way. Now, not too long ago, I did a comparison between two fantastic red dots, the Vortex Venom and the Burris Fast-Fire 3. And I gotta tell you, both of those red dots are fantastic, and they're very similar in a lot of ways. However, at the end of the day, I had to walk away with a winner, and I chose the Vortex Venom, just for a couple of reasons. I thought that it had a few extra settings options, which were nice, and its battery lifespan at 30,000 hours, according to Vortex, was just a little bit better than the Burris, and I felt that the build quality was just a hair better, but only by a hair. Now that said, again, I like the Burris Fast-Fire 3. I own one and I use it, and I think it's fantastic. So at the end of the day, if you've got a Burris Fast-Fire 3, you're doing great. However, again, for the sake of the comparisons, I did walk away with that Vortex Venom. Now, here's the thing. Vortex has another option, and that option is the Vortex Viper. So we're going to be talking about the Venom versus the Viper, and hopefully I won't mix that up too many times today. But we'll be talking about some of the differences and similarities between those two if you're looking to get into red dots or perhaps switch out for something a little bit different. So the Vortex Viper is featured on the Walther Q5 match, and of course it is unloaded. I do have an unloaded magazine in here just for the sake of the comparison and, well, frankly, cool factor. And then the Glock MOS has the Vortex Venom on it right there. And again, unloaded. So once again, both of these offerings are from Vortex, but there are some striking differences between the two. Now, I'll just go ahead and kind of jump into this just a little bit, and we'll talk about some of the specs and wheel in some shooting, and I'll give my final thoughts at the end of this. But at the end of the day, the Vortex Viper does stand just a little bit shorter than the Vortex Venom by actually about 2/10 of, well, actually 2 millimeters rather. The Viper stands at, I believe, 8 millimeters, and the Vortex Venom around 10 millimeters. So that Venom is going to stand a little taller. Now, this Glock 19 MOS, I've done a lot of work with this and a lot of testing on various red dots, including that Burris Fast-Fire 3. One thing you'll notice, I've got some kind of gangly looking suppressor height sights on here. These are Dawson Precision sights. And I did that because I really purposefully wanted to be able to co-witness with this firearm, and hopefully you'll be able to see this sight picture okay, and hopefully the red dot's coming through okay. I do believe it is still on. But I decided to make these pretty tall sights. In fact, these are, I believe, 0.395 inches tall. And they just co-witnessed this Vortex Venom because that Vortex Venom does stand pretty darn tall. Now, you would be at a little bit of an advantage, I guess, with the Viper. If you were going to go with something like a Glock MOS, you could go with shorter sights. However, if you do want to co-witness, you still need to get taller than normal sights. Now, for the Viper, I've actually got this on the Q5 match, and I did it a little bit differently, and the philosophy about it is a little different as well. I am not attempting to co-witness on this. Instead, I'm only running the red dot. And there are advantages and disadvantages to that. Of course, the advantage is you're not trying to worry about any sort of co-witnessing. It's not getting in your way at all. And you're really only focusing on the red dot versus the co-witnessing. You've got the backup iron sights, of course, if something went wrong with that red dot. However, it could also potentially, you know, give or take, maybe interfere with that sight line just a little bit. But it's nice that the Viper does sit a little bit shorter in this. Now, there are definitely some other differences, and I'll stand these guys up and see if I can line these guys up for you, okay? As best I can, anyway. Sometimes it's tough to capture these guys in the camera. Hopefully we're getting that okay. I'll do this several times, so hopefully you'll be able to see. But the difference with the Vortex Venom and the Vortex Viper, the Venom is a 3 MOA sight, and the Viper is going to be a 6 MOA sight. And basically what that means is The further away your target goes and the bigger the MOA, the more that dot is going to cover up the target. So if you're shooting at distance, the smaller MOA is probably going to be your better choice. Now, all of this is opinion. Your mileage may vary there, and some people may disagree with that. That's okay. But when we're talking up close and personal, that 6 MOA or even bigger is going to be ideal for those short distance targets right there. So it's tough to capture this on camera, I gotta tell you, but I know it's there somewhere. Hopefully you can see that okay. I gotta get that screw out of the way there. But again, the difference between those MOAs, 6 MOA and 3 MOA. Now, from a brightness standpoint, there is one difference with the Venom and the Viper. They do both have 10 manual settings, 10 manual adjustments from very dim to very bright. However, the Viper does not have any auto mode, whereas the Venom does, or at least in my research, and I looked all over Vortex's site and several forums, and I could not find mention of any sort of auto function or anything like that. Another difference between the two, they do not take the same battery, and I gotta tell you, that's a little bit of a disappointment. The battery for the Venom is going to be the CR1632, whereas the Viper is going to be the CR2032. So there's a difference between batteries. They're not swappable, unfortunately. A little bit of a bummer there. The next really, really big difference between these two, I'll go ahead and put these up right here. You'll notice that the Venom on your right has a top-loading battery compartment. So it's very easy to swap out your batteries and keep on running. Whereas on the Viper, the battery is actually underneath the unit. It doesn't have any sort of a tray or anything like that you can open up. I know there are some that you can, and you just kind of slide it out and switch your battery, which is okay. This one you actually do have to remove and put a new battery in. I'm not necessarily a fan of that. Now, I don't actually use Loctite for these red dots. I do recommend, and this is not a product placement, so I won't show you the brand, but see if I can cover those up. I won't. It's okay. This is actually just a Wheeler torque screwdriver. I do recommend you get something like this. Of course, it doesn't have to be this one, but it can help really torque those screws down without stripping them. And I recommend somewhere between 10 and 12, I believe it's foot-pounds, to put these screws in. And from a screw standpoint, thankfully, both of these actually take these little guys right here. I don't know how well you can see this, but this is an M3 by 7 millimeter screw with a 0.5 thread pitch. I'll put a link in the description below for Amazon. I highly recommend getting a big bag of those. You can probably get it for $7 or $8, and then you've got screws to last a lifetime. But if you do damage one or lose one, you've got more. And again, both of these do take the same mounting screws, which is nice. And then mounting their plates onto the firearms, you can just use the stock screws that come with them, and both of these use, I believe it's the #1 plate. It is on the MOS, and I think it is on the Q5 match as well. So from an adjustment standpoint, here's another real big difference between the two. The Venom has an elevation and a windage adjustment, and I believe it's a 1 MOA adjustment on this, and you just take a tiny little screwdriver, which is provided with the Venom, and you can make your adjustments and zero in your target. I'm going to line that up again for you. However, on the Viper, it's a little bit different. It still has the windage and elevation adjustments, and they are 1 MOA adjustments as well. But you'll notice on the back, there are 2 extra little screw holes here, and it says lock right there. And so basically, you can lock down your windage and elevation. So the advantage of that is, well, it's all locked down, which is fantastic. However, the disadvantage, and you'll notice on the Glock MOS, I've got big old honking rear sights back there. If I have those on the back, I can no longer lock or unlock the sights. So I either have to sight it in, lock it up, and then put that rear sight on, or I have to just kind of guess and leave it unlocked, perhaps. I don't know. So that might be a consideration if you're going to be co-witnessing. You lose that option for those locks. Of course, unless you're co-witnessing with your rear sight up front, which I know some people do, and then in that case, you're just fine. It's not a problem at all. Now, from an auto-off standpoint, both of these do have an auto-off feature. However, there's no difference. They're both a 14-hour auto-off. Now, I've read in some of the forums, and I'm trying to kind of scoot these up as we go along here so you can see a little bit better. 14 hours is a fairly long amount of time, and what I mean by that is if you're going to carry this, of course it's going to be on all day long because you're moving around, I would imagine. But then at the end of the night, it's still going to be on because you're probably not going to sleep for 14 hours. However, if you do, good for you. I wish I could. But that means that it's going to be on all the time, and so your battery life could come into question a little bit. At the brightest setting, I believe Vortex says that each one of these will run for about 150 hours tops. That's at the brightest setting. So as you wind down on the brightness and get to very dim, you can get all the way up to 30,000 hours. So you're averaging out around 15,000 hours right there. So again, I would keep that in mind as you consider your red dot options. Once again, the biggest difference between these two, that Viper is going to be sitting just a little bit lower. So that can affect how you co-witness, or if you're doing no co-witness at all, like this Q5 match. Again, it's sitting a little bit lower, so it's going to be a little bit closer to the barrel, seemingly making for maybe more accurate shots. I don't know, your mileage may vary, and of course you can adjust that windage and elevation to really compensate for that depending on what distance you're shooting on. So I don't know how much you can really get into that argument, but I suppose you could just a little bit. But both of them definitely have their pluses and minuses. One last thing to talk about on the two of these, you will notice, and it's going to take me a second to line these up here, my cell phone is my viewfinder for my camera, so it always takes a second or two to line these up. But hopefully you'll notice there is one other big difference, and it was one of the walkaway successes with the Venom against the Burris Fastfire. The Venom on the right has a pretty wide field of view, so you get a really nice field of view with that. Whereas on the Viper, now it looks like it's got a great field of view because you're not co-witnessing. However, that field of view is a little bit more narrow. So it's going to fit a little bit closer to perhaps the Glock MOS frame, with the exception of the adjustment buttons on the left side of it. But again, you're losing a little bit of that glass, and that's one thing about the Venom that I really like is the field of view on that. So once again, something to consider perhaps, along with that battery loading. So at the end of the day, both of these red dots are fantastic, and they provide two slightly different ways to achieve the same thing using a red dot while you're shooting. Which one is better? And I always like to try and walk away with a winner with something like this. Once again, I kind of have to go with the Venom, and I would go with that for a couple of reasons. Yes, I know it stands a little bit taller, and that can be a disadvantage unless you're either not wanting to co-witness or you have big honking sights like this Glock 19. But it's got that top-loading battery compartment, which is really nice, really convenient. So if you want to Loctite that thing down, you don't have to remove it again if you don't want to. It also has a slightly wider field of view, which is really nice. I like that. However, at the end of the day, I do like the Viper as well. Again, there's some nice advantages to it, and it's very small, it's very sleek, and as long as you're not co-witnessing, you do have that option to lock them. But again, I would give the edge to the Venom. I just think it's a really good red dot, and for the price, and by the way, both of these are going to come in somewhere between $200 and $250 roundabout for these, which is a fantastic price. But again, both great. The Venom takes it just by a little bit. Now, I'd love to hear your comments on both of these. I'd like to know what you think about them, or your experiences, or even your experiences with some of the other great red dots out there. Someday I might do a comparison between these two, plus the Burris, and maybe even the Romeo 1 on the Sig Sauer. Who knows? So, looking forward to those comments. And once again, be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you next time. Thanks.